Good morning, everyone. We're Group 10, and today we're going to talk about ransomware attacks, high-profile cases, and lessons learned. The agenda for today is the following. First, we'll explain what ransomware is and how it works. Next, we'll talk about three different high-profile real-world cases that demonstrate its really impact. And finally, we'll discuss the key lessons learned from these attacks and explore what organizations can do to strengthen their defenses. To start with, what is ransomware? So ransomware is a type of malicious software that blocks access to computer systems or encrypts its files and then demands payments. This usually happens in cryptocurrency, which is the most popular case. And in exchange for, they are looking payment in exchange for restoring their access. Ransomware is one of the fastest growing cyber threats in the world, with attacks targeting government, hospitals, and global corporations, along with education. And what makes ransomware so dangerous is not only the financial cost, but also the disruption it causes to critical services and public trusts in companies. Moving on, how it works. The first thing that happens always is the infection. So attackers deliver the ransomware through phishing or emails or malicious downloads or exploiting systems vulnerabilities, which are typically coming from vulnerabilities that the company has by itself. The second step that occurs, it's the encryption. So once they are already inside, the malware locks, encrypts the victim's file, making them inaccessible for the company at all. The third step will be the ransom demand, which is a message that appears in the demand, demanding a payment to stop encrypting and everything. So often, this payment is with a deadline and a threat of data destruction or public release. And the fourth step always is the outcome, which victims either pay with no guarantee of recovery or attempt to restore the system through backups and security responses.
Yeah, so now I'm going to talk about one of the high-profile cases with ransomware attacks, and that was the Colonial Pipeline incident. So the Colonial Pipeline is a 5,500-mile fuel pipeline in the US carrying about 45% of the East Coast's gasoline. And on May 7th, 2021, Russian-linked cybercriminal group DarkSide infiltrated Colonial's IT system using stolen credentials. Though the ransomware didn't directly hit the operational pipeline control system, Colonial did shut down the pipeline preemptively to contain the spread, and it created immediate supply chain disruptions like gas shortages due to gas station outages, panic buying, and price spikes. I know when we were all going through this, I remember the lines at the gas station being super, super long and just not places not even having gas. So that was certainly affected by the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack. And then how the Colonial Pipeline was attacked. So DarkSide gained access to the system through a single compromised VPN. The account had belonged to a former employee and had no multi-factor authentication password, only a username and a password. The password had been reused and was later found in a dark web leak of stolen credentials. And because Colonial hadn't disabled old accounts or enforced MFA, the attackers slipped in pretty quietly. And once inside, the hackers moved laterally across Colonial's corporate IT network. They installed DarkSide ransomware, which encrypted files and locked up critical business systems. And targets included billing systems, scheduling software, and internal business operations. Colonial Pipeline paid 4.4 million in Bitcoin to DarkSide within hours of the attack. And later, the FBI was able to recover roughly 2.3 billion or 2.3 million of ransom by tracking cryptocurrency transactions, like we've talked about in class. So lessons learned, obviously, the importance of cybersecurity practices. Poor password hygiene can create national level consequences, as we've seen here with the Colonial Pipeline. Additionally, policy and regulation shifts. This incident led to stronger US government focus on ransomware, mandatory reporting of cyber incidents for critical infrastructure, and push for companies to adopt zero trust architecture and cyber hygiene basics. And finally, it raised public awareness about ransomware. many Americans experienced ransomware's consequences for the first time at the gas pump, like I said with my own experience. And then it put ransomware into mainstream conversation as a national security and daily life issue.
Another case study that we looked at was Ireland's Health Service executive ransomware attack, which was also in 2021. So first, what is Ireland's Health Service executive, also known as the HSE? So the HSE is the publicly funded healthcare system in Ireland, and there are 54 public hospitals under their supervision, as well as other voluntary hospitals which utilize the country's IT infrastructure. So what happened? So the HSE suffered a ransomware attack on May 14th, 2021. The initial infection dated all the way back to March, but went undetected in this time. The system took a while to recover and did not fully recover until September of 2021. The number of appointments in some areas of the system dropped by 80% during this time, so you can see the full magnitude of the attack. On May 28th, HSE corporate activities and 520 patients' data were discovered online. And on the right side of this slide, you can see a tweet that was published by HSE Ireland on the very day of the attack. So, what happened? On March 16th, 2021, a malicious email with a Microsoft Excel attachment was sent to an HSE email address. So interestingly, this email was not even opened until 2 days later. However, both the attachment and the email were opened and it contained malicious code. This code is called a Cobalt Strike and deployed Conti ransomware throughout HSE's systems. A Cobalt Strike was defined in one of the articles that I read as a penetration testing tool that includes remote functionality. So as I mentioned earlier, this attack went undetected for about 8 weeks. Finally, on May 7th, it was first flagged, and there were 16 threat events in the week preceding alone that were detected. After being flagged, the hackers deployed the malware, encrypting many systems, and they reportedly had a digital ransom of 16.5 million euros. This image on the right shows how exactly this worked because the timeline can be a little bit confusing. So the ransomware was not actually deployed until a little bit later in the process. So the aftermath and some takeaways. So from a post-incident investigation, it is believed that the attack stemmed from the Wizard Spider hacking group in St. Petersburg, Russia. So no actual ransom was paid, and the attackers eventually did release a decryption key. This is thought to be because of the international attention and pressure that they got. Even with the key, recovery was quite slow and cost over 100 million euros. And just some general takeaways. So first, the HSE did not have a single responsible owner for cybersecurity. Per HHS.gov, there were known gaps and weaknesses in their cybersecurity system. And one broadly applicable lesson is that one single email can bring down an entire system, and that preparedness can be more important than response. Having these systems in place for timely response could have lessened the monetary and the human cost. And lastly, and perhaps most obviously, is that employee training is necessary.
Now I'm going to be talking about the JVS SA ransomware attack in 2021. So firstly, what is JVS SA? JVS SA is a Brazilian multinational company founded by José Batista Sobrinho and is commonly known as the world's largest meat processing company. They're one of the main exporters of many protein-based products in the world. So back in late May 2021, a ransomware attack was carried out on JBS that primarily targeted plants in the US, Canada, and Australia. The attack forced JBS to take many IT systems offline, effectively halting slaughter and processing productions in dozens of plants per the US, Canada, and Australia. The FBI and the US government investigated and attributed the attack to REvil, also known as the Sodi no Kiwi group, ransomware group, a Japanese group that carries out ransomware attacks based in Russia. So the hackers at REvil carried out a double extortion threat where they basically encrypt systems and threaten to publish stolen data. This is one of the most common forms of ransomware attacks, as sensitive company data as well as their private systems are the most effective way to get to executives at companies in order to extort them to pay your ransoms. Initial reports indicated that the hackers gained access through compromised employee credentials. So there was no email like in other cases, or there was no initial contact. The hackers actually initially hacked into the employee accounts on their local home files, and this allowed them to gain entry into the company's internal servers, leading to the shutdown of those multiple factories. The internal movements, some reports actually say that the internal movements began back in March, 2 months prior to the ransomware attack. And this included data exfiltration, which they later used in May in order to extort and increase the price, their asking price, as well as private server encryption. So the seed that they planted um, in order to shut off the production plants was actually planted 2 months before and was enabled at their discretion in May. Like I said, the attack carried out against JBS is consistent with the information the FBI has on Reveal. So they basically use the same methodology when they attack a company, which is where they use ransomware to encrypt servers. That ransomware is used to disrupt the business processes, which leads to a demand of payment by Reveal. And the data that they steal from the private servers and the encryption that they place on the private servers is threatened to be released in order to increase their leverage. JBS was actually told to pay $11 million in Bitcoin, which they paid for, and then another 30 million were used in order to fully recover their internal servers.
To summarize the three case studies, Island's health service executive attack began through a single phishing email containing malware. Over 520 of the patient's data was leaked, and appointments dropped by around 80%. No clear cybersecurity leadership or preparation was made for any cyber threats. Moving on to Colonial Pipeline. The breach began from a stolen password from an old employee's VPN account. The pipeline shut down, and there's a widespread gas shortage and financial crisis along the east to south coast of the United States. In the end, Colonial Pipeline had to pay $4.4 million in ransom. In JBS's case, our evil hacked into JBS systems similar to Colonial Pipeline through compromised credentials. Production at multiple slaughter/production plants were halted, and company information that was extracted by our evil was threatened to be leaked. JBS had to pay off the hackers in Bitcoin, which amounted to around $11 million. Moving on to the big picture. Small entry points led to huge fallout. For Colonial Pipeline and JBS, it was through one stolen password that led to them having to pay millions in ransom. And in Ireland's case, it was through a single phishing email. Next, preparedness is not the same as reaction. None of these companies had any clear cybersecurity leadership or preparation to deal with any cyber attacks. In turn, they had to pay millions in ransom, and it took them months to even years to recover from these attacks. This all boils down to one point. Basic cybersecurity practices are essential for protecting critical services and minimizing damage. If any of these companies had more secure passwords or were more meticulous in accessing their emails, they would have prevented major crises and avoided paying millions in ransom. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to email us, and we also have a coup for you to play.